Hello, and welcome back to Get It Off Your Chest, a What I Wish I Knew guide from girlfriends who have lived, fought, and survived breast cancer. My name is Andy, and I am proud to be the host of this amazing group of women. As usual, we have Dr. Corey Jordan and Amber Melby, and joining us in our hair loss discussion today is Marcia Miller and Missy Baxter of New Ulm. We will hear their stories of hair loss throughout their breast cancer journey, as well as what they learned along the way. For many women, this is one of the most difficult and emotionally damaging parts of breast cancer. It makes the disease so much more real and is often thought of as the moment when person turns into patient. We hope this discussion provides comfort to women who have gone through similar experiences or are currently going through them. And with that, we'll start off with Amber.
I'm Amber Melby. I am a 7-year breast cancer survivor, and I am the founder and president of Be the Light, which is a local nonprofit here in southern Minnesota that raises money to create programs and support breast cancer survivors and their families in our area. My journey with hair loss, losing my hair, going through chemotherapy in 2015 was based on a lot of different factors, as it is for everybody. It's such a personal decision. And when I think back to that time 7 years ago, I think, and what I've shared with so many other survivors that I've met along the way, is there is no right or wrong answer in your choice to wear a wig, wear a scarf, wear nothing, etc. Do the cold cap. For me...
Can I interrupt? Who talked to you about all those options? Was it your oncologist? Was it your... Did it just happen along the way that it was just expected? Was there a nurse that gave you some guidance? Or
what I remember for myself was that the cancer coordinator, Susan, they talked a lot about when you would lose your hair. So, for someone like myself who was receiving the Red Devil treatment at the time, they said it'll probably be between your second and third treatment, which is every 2 weeks. They kind of prepare you for your hair starting to fall out in the shower and what that's going to look like and feel like. But I don't remember anyway, and the other ladies in the room are more recent survivors through their treatment, so maybe they would be able to fill in those gaps better. But for myself, I just remember them kind of prepping you for what would happen. I assume there probably was resources in some of the materials that they gave us for
we give you
wigs.
a big binder.
I'm assuming it was in there somewhere. For myself, what I did is reached out to some other survivors that I knew of and asked where they would recommend to look for a wig. I just knew that was probably the route I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. So I did go up to one, I should have looked up the name, but it was up in the Minneapolis area, and I cannot remember the name of it now. I'll look it up while someone else is speaking, but that's where I went. I had a really good luck with that. So I don't remember other than that for resources other than that they kind of
I feel like we do a really good job at talking about these are the drugs you're going to get. Yeah. They all have really weird names, and these are all the side effects that are going to happen to you. And oh, by the way, you're going to lose your hair, and then you're going to have this, and you might get nauseous. But we don't, we don't talk
Elaborate
about that
on those
piece.
Things.
I was told to shave with a clipper and not a razor blade.
Yeah,
that was
remember that. That
you
was
remember
really
that.
only my guideline. Also,
Yep.
I mean, they talked about when it may happen to be prepared for it. And that it would be best if you used a clipper instead of a razor.
Yeah. But no one really talks about the emotional impact of
I think there was, again, brochures in the gigantic...
God, we gotta do better. We gotta do better.
There's a pamphlet on self-image or body image or whatever. Which does
a pamphlet.
A pamphlet.
It's like
maybe a booklet.
6-year conversation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I knew early on that I was probably going to be the most comfortable in a wig, and for a couple different reasons. Our kids at the time were in 8th grade, 7th grade, and 4th grade, and I think so that was a big factor for me. I wanted to look as normal as I could for them. I wanted them to feel to not be scared of what I would look like being bald, and the next biggest factor, I guess, outside of my family was I don't like pity. I didn't want people looking at me in that way. And, you're grieving at the time. You're going through all these emotions of this new diagnosis. You get a diagnosis that you could be life-threatening. So there's so many factors that play into this time in your life. And for me, you're angry. You're going through those stages of grief. You're angry. And so for me, one of the ways that I could battle against this machine was to look as normal as I could for myself and for other people that were around me. And avoid the pity. And when I ever got a side eye of anyone looking at me that way, I just remember thinking, don't look at me like that. I am fine. I'm going to beat this. I want to help other people. I don't like accepting help from anyone else. Found that out the hard way. So that was a very, that was my decision. I knew early on that as I started going through treatment and my hair started to fall out, decided we're going to make the most of this. We are going to make lemonade out of lemons. So we're gonna have a party, and I'm gonna invite all my close friends and my sister, and so I think I had my sister and like my 4 best friends planned to come. They made their own T-shirts, and I just remember I remember standing in my my house, looking down our driveway, and they had met at my best friend Sarah's house right up the hill previously, probably had a glass of wine if I know them, and they just came in like a caravan up my driveway. And so we sat in the kitchen, and they all took turns with the clippers, and our daughter, who was in 7th grade at the time, came in, and she was really close to a lot of my friends and my sister, and so they said, "Here, Riley, do you want to take a swipe?" And they're trying to make it fun and drinking wine and whatever. So she took the clippers and came over and trying to be strong and be one of the girls, and did a swoop, and I just started sobbing. So it was very emotional. We got through it, took lots of pictures. I remember too, as soon as it was over, and they shave it down so far, right? They don't get everything. I remember putting one of my wigs on right away. Like the pictures of that night are me we're all in our tank tops, and I have my wig on right away, which is interesting to me. I kind of regret that, actually, not having more photos of those times, but that was a very emotional night. And then I went through my next treatment, and I still had the buzz cut, I guess. I was still wearing a wig, but I still had some hair. And then it was after, I think, my 3rd treatment, my head just started hurting so bad, like pins and needles, which they tell you it's going to when those hair follicles die. And I remember my kids were at confirmation at church, and I was home alone with my mother-in-law for some reason. My husband was out with the kids, and it just hurt so bad I just could not take it anymore. So I went in my bathroom, and I picked up my husband's razor, and I put shaving cream on my head, and I remember looking in the mirror and saying, "If you can do this, you could do anything." And I shaved the rest by myself. And it felt so good to get it off, because it finally hurt once I got all of those hair follicles out of there. That's one of the only pictures I have of myself is of that night. I remember taking one, and I thought, that's it. And but I chose to wear a wig. If I could do it over again, I think I may choose differently, only because I've met so many other beautiful women since going through the same treatment and through Be the Light that I've learned from, and I've taught, I've seen how they've handled being bald, and I've told people over the years, I feel like I maybe cheated the system a little bit, cheated my experience, just because when I look at the pictures of myself now with my wig on, compared to like my friend Shiloh I went through treatment with, who always wore a beautiful headscarf, I don't look sick. I don't look, like someone who is getting cancer treatment. So I got what I wanted. But 7 years later, I kind of wish I could go back and give myself a hug and say, it would be okay if you chose the other way too. And I was telling these ladies before we got started that I was so protective of my kids and wanted to be normal for them. And then one time they were having friends over, and I said, do you guys care if I don't put my wig on today or whatever? And they just looked at me like I was crazy, like I had insulted them. And in that moment I realized they didn't care. They just needed mom to be okay and to, be the mom that they needed. They didn't care at all what I ever looked like in public or at home. So that was a really kind of humbling aha moment for me. But the other thing I would say is we've said there is no right or wrong for any woman in their decision. It's a very emotional decision for every woman. And again, I think that's what we've learned in all of these awesome ladies that we've been able to meet through different programs is every choice is personal and there's no right or wrong. So
It's just another way to fight the diagnosis, right?
Right.
And that visual image of being bald makes it so much more real because we take you through surgery and you lose some of your femininity that way surgically, but you can
Yes.
hide that and cover it and have prosthetics and
Yep.
reconstruction and what have you. But when the hair goes, it's like that's the one thing that now makes me a patient. So it's
visible.
It's visible and it makes it real. And you fought it,
Yeah.
and because you're a fighter and you're brave.
All those emotions, all those years later, that is buried deep, and
Yeah.
this is why we're
Still
doing
comes
this.
up. Yep, it's crazy. So you want my experience with my
Introduce
losing-
yourself.
Okay, my name is Marcia. I was diagnosed with breast cancer July 2020, right around the good old COVID time. But again, you did get the information about I had to have the red devil also, so I knew that my hair was going to be falling out within the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of getting chemo. And it really is kind of like what you hear, like it just starts to come out in clumps. And I had longer hair at the time, and it really just, oh my gosh, I've got a handful of hair. And in the shower, all of a sudden you're looking down and you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And I remember sending a picture to my two younger sisters, which I'm sure they so appreciated. This is how gross this looks. Oh my gosh, what is happening? But yeah, and it's a very, very emotional time when all of a sudden you're like, I can't take this anymore. I've got hair everywhere. It's got to go. But yet you want to hold on to it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And because of COVID, only so many people were kind of around me. And so my sister got the lucky job of, for whatever reason, I didn't want my husband or my son to do it. I don't know why. It was just something I just didn't want them to do. So I asked my sister to do it, and she came over, and I just cried the whole time. And I do not have any pictures of myself that way. I wish I would. Again, looking back, you think differently. At that time, I couldn't take it. I didn't want to see it any more than I had to. And I did. I mentioned to you girls, I felt like an alien. I hated everything about it. I cried about it a lot. I just wore head scarves or caps, which I think I did get some information from the nurses at the oncology lab. Gave me some almost like book magazines or whatever that you could order from, and then I started getting onto some websites that I liked or whatever that I found some different headscarves and things that I was comfortable with. And that's kind of what I chose to wear and do. But for whatever reason, and I mentioned this to Missy one night at our survival fitness group, it was almost harder for me to see myself after I lost my eyebrows because I felt that made me look more sick. For whatever reason, I felt like that just changes your whole facial features. And I'm not very apt with makeup, so I just didn't even want to try to paint anything on my face. So I just really felt like that kind of took me over the edge even more.
It's really common because the steroids make the face swell,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
the eyebrows come out, and you're looking
Yeah.
at yourself. Who is this person?
Yes, it's like
It's really hard.
it just is the strangest thing when all of a sudden you don't have that on your face anymore. But yes, it is quite the experience. I don't know. It's not a fun experience, I don't think, for any woman to really lose their hair, and it is just kind of awful.
Marcia, I remember when I brought you a whole handbag that year.
Yes.
And I came to your house. Now, granted, you didn't know I was coming.
Yes.
But I knocked on your door, and
Yes.
you answered,
Yeah.
and you were not wearing anything.
Okay.
Okay, this was December of
Yeah.
2020.
Yes.
And I didn't know you.
Yep.
I mean, in hindsight, I guess I knew who you were, but
Right.
when I saw your name,
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
So you've been nominated to receive this whole handbag. So I knock on your door and deliver it, and you answered bald. And I thought, she is so beautiful and brave. And here I just told my own story, so you know how I felt. So, and I just was so much admired you so much in that moment and thought, wow, look at her go. You go, girl.
Well, see, and I think that's, I mean, as we're talking about this, and you're telling your story, and you're thinking you should have done something differently or whatever. We're so hard on how we what choices we make or how we think we feel. Like when you said, no one else feels that
No.
about you. You're
No.
the one that feels that
Now,
way
how
about
do you feel when you, let's say, go to the grocery store and you see a sister going through the process and she's
Mhm.
bald and
Yeah.
you're not looking at her like
No.
she's a patient or a sick
Not at
person.
all.
You're looking at her with a
Yes.
different perception. And I think that's really important
Mm-hmm.
because when you're on that receiving end of that look,
Yeah.
it can feel like a
So
violation,
true.
right?
Yes.
But it's not. It's
I know.
a kinship.
I would
That's
never,
so true.
ever, you think, I mean, I just told Missy on the way in here, I love her hair. She's got this short little hair coming in and she looks absolutely beautiful. And yet, everyone's always self-conscious. I mean, and it's like, oh.
And when your hair was
Yes.
like that,
Yes.
when people tell you that, I remember your hair coming
I
in like
know.
that.
You
telling
just
you
roll
the
your
same
eyes
thing.
I
like,
know,
sure,
you're
I'll
just
just
like,
say
yeah.
it.
It's like it just was getting too warm underneath my scarves or hats, so this is it, But I was so thankful to have hair back. It was what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes. So Missy.
All right, I am Missy, and I was diagnosed in August of 2021. Started the Red Devil in November, a week after my second treatment. Yep, handfuls. And I think the anxiety just leading up to, okay, it's got to go today, was the worst. Because those days leading up to it, I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to wash it. I wasn't going to brush it. I didn't want to do anything because I would just, you knew that it was just going to
Yeah,
fall out.
you're
So it's
losing
just that anxiety you had about getting rid of it. That was the worst. Because once it was done, I felt like this huge relief. Like, thank God that's over. But going through it was terrible. My husband, in our bathroom, he got the clipper out. And again, because of
Mhm.
COVID, I wasn't around
Yep.
many people.
Mhm.
So we asked our youngest son, the older boys were kind of off on doing their thing. So we asked our 6-year-old, do you want to watch mommy get her hair cut? Or do you want us to do it after you go to bed? Nope, I want to watch. So I sit on the stool, my husband starts with the first swipe of the clipper, and he just lost it.
Oh, did
He just bawled
Yes.
and bawled, and I'm bawling, and
Yes.
like, how are we gonna get through this? I'm like,
Yeah.
how are we gonna pull it together? And so I told him, I said, I need you to be brave. I need you to hold my hand. I need you to get me through this. And so then he settled down and he held my hand,
Yeah.
and off it went. And although it was awful, it was also this huge relief that I didn't have to sit and wait
Mm-hmm.
for it to happen.
You had control.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can control that.
Missy, I love it that you included him in the process
Mhm.
and didn't hide your diagnosis or your experience
Mhm.
Yeah.
from the children. That's a really difficult thing, I think, for
Yes.
a lot of patients to figure out how do I bring them in and be part of it. And if you don't, I think their imaginations make it so much worse
Right.
than what it is. But
And every night since that night, he's prayed for my hair to come back.
Oh,
In his nightly
really?
prayers, he prays for it every night. But now he's started, instead of praying for my hair to come back, he's thankful that my hair is coming back.
Yeah.
So it's cute.
Very cute.
But it was probably a couple weeks ago. I asked my first hair started growing in before my chemo was over, and so it was these long white hairs. So everything was nice except for I had these sticking up long
Yeah.
white hairs, and I said to my husband, I'm like, can you just get the clipper out and just get rid of those white long hairs, but don't touch it, don't
Yeah.
do any of the good stuff, just those white hairs. And so I sat on the stool again in the bathroom. He got out the clipper, and I lost it.
Oh, yeah.
I said, for the first time, I know what PTSD is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was just that
Yeah.
feeling of exactly what happened
Yes.
in November. Even though I knew I wasn't going to lose my hair, it was
Mhm.
just, oh my God, it was just all
Just brought
came
it all
just
back.
alive.
Mhm.
Yep. But it was much better after he took those wispy whites off. But yes, when the eyebrows and the eyelashes came off, which was after chemo ended. Chemo
Mhm.
ended,
Yeah.
and then they all fell out. And then all of a sudden, I'm done with chemo, and all of a sudden, I looked the worst I had looked
Mhm.
the entire time.
Yeah.
That was, yeah. You
Yeah.
looked in the mirror and you had nothing, and it was like,
Mhm.
oh man, I'm done with chemo. Why do I have to look so awful now?
Mhm.
Right.
But it didn't take long for them to start growing back. Yeah.
And so, who did you guys go to? Did you guys go to different people for help and support, especially Missy and Marsha, during COVID? Obviously, when you couldn't go to other friends or other people for help, what did you look to for that kind of understanding or support, or at least something to lean on?
Honestly, I think with me, the oncology nurses in the chemo lab are absolutely amazing. they are so kind and understanding, and they did offer advice or help if they had certain websites for you to go to, or whatever. And again, we didn't have any type of groups that were getting together or any supports and that way, but family and friends, obviously, just as much as you can help you get through it as much as you can that way.
Yeah. I signed up for anything I could through Be the Light.
Mhm.
Anytime there was
Yeah.
anything, I was signing up and going to it.
And mine was a different time because it was
Yes.
non-COVID, and before, obviously, Be the Light was here and we had other options to get together, but I was grateful. Our chemo nurses connected another lady in the area. I think I spoke about that last time, but Shiloh, who was a nurse and like I am, and same age, same diagnosis, and they put us on the same chemo days. So we just really lucked out by having our own little built-in support system. So we would text each other, what are you gonna do about this? Do you have the side effect? Because again, no friend, none of our friends or family can understand these conversations. And anytime I start to break down in that discussion of shaving my head and my family's sitting here or a friend, I instantly feel uncomfortable that I've made them uncomfortable.
Oh, yes.
So
Yeah.
we stop talking about it. So
Yeah.
so refreshing to be able to
Mhm.
share with other survivors. So I was
Yeah.
lucky to have Shiloh to
Yeah.
go through that with
Yeah.
at the time. And yes, the staff are wonderful there.
They
But
are.
you too. I mean, the whole cancer during COVID could probably be its own full podcast.
Oh,
I can't
my
even
goodness.
imagine
Yeah.
those kind of
Yeah.
the layers that came with that.
Driving
Mhm.
myself to chemo every week, driving home.
Yeah.
It was pretty lonely.
Oh,
Yeah.
not bad.
We had mentioned cold caps and different things that people do to kind of either prepare for or just deal with hair loss. Can you talk a
Sure.
bit about that?
This is Dr. Jordan, and there's no good way to prevent or get you prepared for what is to come when the hair falls out. In my former practice, we had built a cancer center out in Buffalo, Minnesota, and one of the things that I thought was really important to have there was a wig room that was staffed by a former patient who also now has her own hair salon where she treats specifically women that are facing hair loss for cancer and then the regrowth. And so we would bring her in, and she was so nice and so supportive, and she had this beautiful little area where families could come and gather, and it was quiet and respectful, and she would do the head shaving. She'd give you different options. Then she had an esthetician that would come in and do the makeup and show you what to do the eyebrows. That service came through the American Cancer Society, and that was great. But then no one wanted the wigs because the
Yeah.
wigs were too hot and they were too heavy.
Yeah.
So we found that, the scarves actually did really well. But the service that she provided was
Oh,
really
wow.
great because she could talk you through it from
You
a
bet.
survivor's perspective, and then she'd seen so many families go through it that she kind of already knew what questions were going to be asked and how to just handle it, right?
Yeah.
So it was a safe space. And it'd be nice to have something similar like that here. But again, I don't know what kind of traction there would be. And then
Yeah.
COVID came, and
Yes. Yeah.
it's just a mess.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different options, and cold cap therapy is something that is an option. You end up still losing about 50% of the hair follicles. It requires a lot of work. You have to have satin pillows. You have to cool the scalp to a certain temperature and wear this cap before, after, and during treatment. For some women, it works really well. For some women, you spend all this money because it can be a little expensive, and then you still have a significant amount of hair loss, and that can be very defeating. And just, one more thing to kick you when you're already down.
Right.
So I think it works really well for some people, not so well for others, but it's a good option to discuss with one of the reps if that's something that someone's interested in. But then, from an emotional perspective, there's no way to prepare you for that turning point in treatment, right? The rebirth, I think, is really fun when the hair starts coming back in, because often it doesn't come back in
No.
the same.
No.
I've seen many of my patients initially that have dark brown hair, straight, come back curly redheads or something dramatic that way, which is kind of interesting and fun. I think one of the refreshing parts about Survival Fitness is that we have women that show up to the program that don't even wear the scarf and just show up with the little peach fuzz because they don't care. They're with their girls,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And they all get it. And
Yeah.
so that safe space, I think, is just so important. You can just be yourself.
A couple other resources that I was going to mention that a book that I read when I was going through this was called It's Not About the Hair. It's by a lady named Deborah Jarvis, and the book was really unique because she was a chaplain that supported breast cancer patients out in Seattle, and during that time she was diagnosed with breast cancer herself. But it was just, it's been years since I read it, but I give it as gifts to other survivors when I meet them if they're going through that. I remember it made me laugh and made me cry, but it was very relatable. So I recommend that book to other people. The other thing is I was, the wig place that I use was called It's Still Me Wig Studio, and that's up in St. Louis Park. And what I really liked about that and would highly recommend them if people are considering a wig in the southern Minnesota area, is that the owner was a breast cancer, or you know what, I have to take that back. I think she was a leukemia survivor, but she had lost her hair and was just so professional. And I took my best friend Julie with me, and they ask you all these questions and really make it personal, and you try them all on, and just kind of, she was very, very helpful. And I left there with two because of course I couldn't choose just one. I needed two styles. Nice. What if I wanted to be a short blonde someday? Right. And the other day I wanted a little bit longer and darker and curlier.
Right.
Did you name them? Did they have names?
They didn't, but actually, when I'm talking about my kids and the journey and their view of it, we have pictures of them with them on. That's pretty funny, like, joking around in my wigs, but I ended up wearing just one, probably 90% of the time. Hardly ever wore the other one. I will also say, you can see down there, we have a wig here in the Be the Light office that we had purchased for a lady who had wanted one,
sure.
Going through treatment, and then she unfortunately passed away last year, so her family donated it back. But we've thought about that. Is that something that we could be as a resource? Mine are sitting in boxes in my basement closet, hopefully never to be used again by me, or, well, no, I shouldn't say that, by anyone, right? I would like them to say and no one would need them, but the reality of it is that somebody will. So.
And I think I mentioned to you too that I had ordered, because you don't know how some of the scarves or the head things are going to fit on you. And I have some with still some tags on it, or I've never worn that. I'm like, I would love to, give those to someone who just wants to try them, or if there's, they want to come in and just see them, whatever. So I don't know if that's
I think we should just bring them here,
right,
and keep a space for them, and then just have them here for people who are coming to our Relight retreats or survival fitness classes.
So that's definitely something I will
try different styles.
Yeah,
because I ordered. I don't even know how many.
I know, and you can spend a lot of money
from Etsy and Amazon.
You guys, and then we get someone from the local hair salon who can create the safe space for the head shaving and the thing, and then now we're doing it.
Yes, here's some, here's some that you can look at and see how it fits your head and how you look at it in it, and
And I had some hand-me-downs from another breast cancer patient who was Heather, who was a little further along. So when she was done with them, she handed them on to me, and it was like, ooh, all of a sudden, ooh, I have new hats.
Like a new wardrobe. One other local resource I'd like to mention too, that we actually have partnered with a good friend of mine, Kelsey Frederickson, owns the Painted Lady downtown here, and she does microblading for eyebrows. Speaking of eyebrows, so I have had mine microbladed. I know that any of you listening can't see this, but I too really missed that part of my, look, I guess.
Yeah.
And so she suggested it. I don't have any tattoos, so to me, I was like, that's a tattoo. I don't think I can do that. So, and she's like, it's semi-permanent tattooing, it looks whatever. I love mine. I've recommended them to other people who have also done it, but I would like to partner with her in the future, and she would love to work with us to pay for them for survivors, because it's not it's not an inexpensive thing. They're about $400 to $500.
Oh my goodness.
Does she do 3D nipple tattooing? Because we could make it a 2-for-1.
She does not, but we have Trent. Remember, we need to have a nipple eyebrow party. But we could come up with a really creative name for that. I can already see your wheels turning over there, Corey.
Nips and eyes.
Nips and brows.
Nips and brows. Eyes up. Goodness. I don't know.
Something
good.
But you could come get your nipples and your eyebrows.
Come to New Ulm for your nipples and your eyebrows.
Seems like those are the last to come in the eyebrows too.
They are.
Mine are struggling.
Yeah.
And I always had to, mine were always thick and bushy, and I think that's the other thing. Like you said, the texture of your hair. I had to have them waxed and tweezed and whatever, and then they came in very light, very thin, very sparse. So that has been really odd.
Yes, I'm not used to that either. I had very thick eyebrows before.
But I didn't realize how much I missed them until she microbladed them back on. But the before and after is pretty cool. I'll show you guys when we're done here.
Nice.
The photo. So that's another resource that we could offer. I would highly recommend her.
One
Yeah.
thing that I want to ask you guys about or have you comment on is, you know, when the hair is gone and you have the patient visible profile, there's a lot of support, family, friends, because they know that you're going through something. And then the hair comes back and you're done with your chemo and people think, okay, well, she's fine.
She's fine.
She's not fine for quite some time, if ever, right? Because you're always going to be permanently changed. But when the hair comes back, people think you've closed that chapter and now you've moved on. How do you deal, process, handle? What do you think about that?
Is that our mental health topic? No, I'm
Honestly,
I mean, there's so many layers to that
Yeah.
subject.
I mean, I still feel like I'm dealing with that. So, you know, it's only been, really, I just got done with my final radiation treatment about a year ago. So I still feel like I'm coming out of some of my treatment and dealing with some of the medications and things right now that are still kind of kicking my butt a little bit. And so I have had that conversation where, okay, you're done and you're done with, you don't have cancer right now and you're done with your treatments and your hair is back and you're moving on, so you must be fine. You're not so fine yet. At least I'm not so fine yet. You know, there are still layers that you have to work through yet. And like Dr. Jordan has said, I don't know, there are some things, you know, Amber, you're still talking about the 7 years from now, you know, later. And there are things that just kind of trigger. And it's a life-changing experience.
Days where you feel like, I'm great. I'm
I got
past
this.
that. I feel good. I feel great. And then the next day you have just, you know, a meltdown over it.
And like you said, I think there's a lot to be said about the PTSD word, and don't use that lightly, because I for myself, when I got through it like that, I always I've shared my story a lot about the first year was harder after treatment. The year after treatment was harder because, to your point, Corey, you have all of this support during treatment. Your family is being taken care of.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden people, you're good.
Yeah.
We're going to go help someone else now, which is great for
Exactly.
that reason. But at the same time, you're not okay. And then you are left to deal with what just happened, you know, and that takes a long time. So for someone who's 7 years out compared to you guys who are more recent, it gets easier every day. But I would say it was a good 2 to 3 years of occasional meltdowns and just the same, you know, what just happened thing. But it gets easier as time goes, and that's
But
the good thing.
hasn't it been fun though? So you got us going here with the Survival Fitness Group, and now this last one you joined us, and how fun that was to have you in our group, even though you're out of treatment for a while, and then everyone's at kind of a different stage, but we still sit there and gabbing and talking about different experiences and stuff, and that still just helps me get through another day.
I
When
think
someone
that's so
else was in my position and helped, you know, I feel weird now being the mentor, being that far out, but I remember I would just hang on anybody's
Exactly.
stories
It
and
just
words.
gives me hope though.
Yes.
I'm like,
You know,
7 years.
Yes.
Oh, I can't wait for 7
I know.
years.
Yes.
I don't want to rush time, but
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know.
I know.
Well, it's and it also helped me because when I decided to join the group, which I hadn't before, it was like, well, yeah, you are still a survivor, even no matter how many years
Exactly.
out you are.
Yeah.
And then it did remind me of being in those spots where you guys are. And again, I'm crying talking about shaving my head, so it's still a very sensitive
Oh my
subject.
gosh,
It's
yeah.
there. You just, it's like any grief. You learn how to move past it, and but it can be brought as soon as you bring it up, and especially in a safe
Oh, yeah.
zone here where we can say anything. Brings up all of those feelings. So it's rewarding no matter what stage you're at to be
Definitely.
with survivors.
the stories may be different, but it's a shared trauma, right? And it's going to be a shift for the rest of your lives.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be a negative shift.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the club nobody wants to be in.
Yep.
But if you have to be in it, we're a pretty fun group, we say.
That's right.
And we can support each other. And, you know, you don't want to be in the group. But again, when you are, I mean, now we have our own little tribe to support each other and share these stories. And like you said, it's a lifelong journey. So very thankful we have each other.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Marcia, I shared your story, the ice cream story. Do you want to share your ice cream story? Because I think that was such a powerful story, and I had to share it with one of my other patients recently.
Well, I kind of think I'm the one that found it more humorous than everybody else, but I was going through radiation and taking the drive down to Mankato every day by myself and back, and dealing with that, and I was having a tough day. I was fatigued and I was tired of it all, and before I left Mankato, I decided I needed ice cream, and I was going to get ice cream. So I drove through whatever drive-through and got one of those big old chocolate milkshakes, and they don't make them just with the caps, they make them with the swirl of whipped cream and everything on top. So it was this huge thing, and I'm taking that baby home with me and driving, and got a little bit carried away with whatever, and the whole top part of the whipped cream came off and landed on my chest, and since I no longer have breasts or boobs or anything on top, it basically rolled right down and plopped in my lap to melt whipped cream all over me. And at that time, I just started sobbing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm crying in my car with my chocolate shaped whipped cream all over me. I must have looked like, if anyone saw me, like just a hot mess. And then I started laughing because I'm like, how pathetic is this, Marsha? And I just laughed then all the way home. So,
But you shared that story at Survival
Yes.
Fitness, and the whole room understood exactly
Yes.
what you were talking about.
So yeah, it was
If you
just,
told that to a bunch of non-survivors,
Right.
non-breast cancer, they
They'd
would
be
be
like-
mortified.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Why was that funny to you? And I'm like, no, you
Right.
seriously, I was just a
That's
mess. So yeah,
such a therapeutic story. I
Yeah.
love
It
that
really
story.
is.
so yeah, it was. And ice cream still happens to be my comfort, even though
Even though
it, it can be a messy treat. Anyway, so there you go.
Thank you for that one.
That's awesome.
All right, I think this is all we will cover today with hair loss. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could talk about, but we can save that for a later episode. Thank you for joining us, and tune in for our next topic, mental health. We'll be taking on what it's like to mentally process having breast cancer at the time of diagnosis all the way into survivorship in a 2-part podcast. Thanks again for listening. We hope you took the time to get it off your chest.